My paramour is passionately kissing my closest friend in a luxurious aquatic facility at a vacation haven, brazenly displayed on a social media platform. And truthfully, I'm no longer experiencing a semblance of sorrow. I am utterly incandescent with rage. Allow me to recount precisely how I ascertained that my romantic relationship was an absolute fabrication, because this represents an egregious level of perfidy that I am still endeavoring to mentally process. And this entire saga warrants being heard by all of you. 3 weeks prior, Brian informed me he was in need of a period of solitary contemplation. He simply strolled into my apartment, where, incidentally, he had been residing without financial obligation for nearly a year, and declared he felt overwhelmed, necessitating a span of time to methodically sort through various issues. He claimed his professional endeavors were the source of immense pressure. He expressed uncertainty regarding our future as a couple. He required a couple of weeks to achieve mental clarity. I directly inquired if this announcement constituted a definitive dissolution of our relationship, and he adamantly vowed that it did not. He asserted his enduring affection for me, merely requiring time alone. He was intending to temporarily lodge at his brother Stephen's dwelling, and we were to maintain minimal communication while he systematically worked through his emotional state. Acceptable, I suppose. I instructed him to utilize the time he needed and resolve his personal matters. I was certainly not prepared to implore someone to remain whose metaphorical footsteps were clearly already heading toward the exit. He gathered a travel satchel and departed, and I resumed my normal routine. Yes, the situation was unfortunate. But I was not about to utterly disintegrate emotionally over a man incapable of mature, adult communication. Do you know who proved to be exceptionally bolstering during this challenging interval? Emily, my most trusted friend of 6 years, the individual I literally confided in with every single aspect of my existence. She arrived at my residence that initial evening, equipped with vino, and opined that Brian was likely just experiencing a panic attack concerning commitment, and that he would eventually return. Over the subsequent 3 weeks, her textual messages were incessant, she extended numerous invitations for outings, and she maintained the persona of the ideal, supportive companion. I divulged every intimate detail of my association with Brian to her. Every contentious debate, every misgiving I harbored, every clandestine thought. She was privy to it all, because that is the fundamental role of closest companions. Or so I thought. Wrong. 2 Fridays prior, I was seated at my workstation during my designated luncheon period, mindlessly scrolling through the Instagram feed while consuming a prepared meal. Emily's ephemeral story popped up. A photograph depicting a shoreline at sunset. Pleasant enough, I dismissed it. I swiped onward to the subsequent upload. Brian, submerged in a pool at a high-end resort, with Emily's forearm draped casually around him. The next story. A depiction of them locked in a full embrace. A complete passionate kissing session taking place in the water. The accompanying inscription read, "Sometimes the most exceptional developments are utterly unforeseen," complete with heart-shaped emoticons. My colleague Maggie interrogated me regarding my well-being because I imagine my facial expression exhibited some kind of theatrical contortion. I presented my handheld device to her, and she emitted an audible, sharp inhalation of breath. But here is the crucial distinction. I did not weep. I did not experience a complete emotional breakdown. I became infuriated. I instantaneously telephoned Emily. Directly to voicemail. I redialed. Voicemail once more. I transmitted a written message demanding to know precisely what the absolute hell was transpiring. 0 reply. Simultaneously, she continued to upload more stories. Them at a bar integrated into the pool structure, imbibing beverages. Them on the sandy shore, purportedly experiencing their finest existence. I called Brian. Also, straight to voicemail. I left an audio message unequivocally commanding him to return my call without delay. Maggie suggested I should be excused from my shift, but I declined. I successfully completed my entire workday because I was resolutely unwilling to permit this situation to further exacerbate my already compromised day. I returned to my abode, activated my personal computer, and initiated a meticulous scrutiny of their shared social media presence, as if I were conducting an exhaustive criminal investigation. And what did I ascertain? The subtle indicators were omnipresent once I possessed the critical context. Brian leaving comments on Emily's workout-related self-portraits from months ago. Her posting updates from beverage establishments situated in close proximity to his workplace. Flirtatious written exchanges between the two of them that I had somehow managed to disregard. They had been systematically cultivating this relationship directly before my very eyes. I contacted my sibling Josie, and was met with her declaration that she was prepared to immediately drive from her residence and potentially commit a violent crime. I advised her to regain her composure because I had the matter firmly within my grasp. I was currently uncertain regarding the precise modus operandi, but I was assuredly not going to simply passively lament my misfortune. Throughout that entire weekend, they persistently posted sequential stories. Shoreline photographs, photographic documentation of dinner engagements, images of shared therapeutic massages, the entirety of a romantic getaway. And neither individual responded to a single one of my persistent attempts to contact them via call or text. Absolute radio silence while they flaunted their infidelity across every digital platform. Monday, at my place of employment, I maintained my composure, remaining focused. Yes, certain colleagues were cognizant of the incident because information tends to circulate, but I managed to hold myself together. I was not going to afford them the gratification of witnessing my ruin. Tuesday, I purposefully drove past Stephen's residence, the location Brian claimed he was utilizing. His automobile was conspicuously absent, naturally, as he was in a southern coastal state. Wednesday afternoon, Emily finally returned my communication. She commenced with an elaborate, self-serving discourse detailing her profound regret, explaining how circumstances simply unfolded organically, and how she and Brian had been engaged in protracted communication for several months and consequently developed mutual affection. She conveyed this information with a shocking degree of detachment, as if she were merely providing a synopsis of a newly broadcast television program. I permitted her to continue, allowing her to elaborate on how they had forged a profound connection during Brian's phase of emotional self-discovery, how they had initially resisted their burgeoning sentiments but eventually found themselves compelled to acknowledge them, how Brian had supposedly been experiencing profound dissatisfaction within our established relationship for nearly a calendar year. Then I posed a solitary query. Precisely how long, in quantitative terms, had this situation been unfolding? She responded with, months. They had been engaging in these confidential discussions for months while she was simultaneously offering solace to me regarding my relationship dilemmas. While she was furnishing me with counsel concerning Brian, she was concurrently pursuing him without my knowledge. And then she uttered the statement that induced an overwhelming surge of anger. She claimed that Brian and I were essentially already past the point of salvage anyway, that our partnership had reached its natural conclusion, and that she was, in effect, performing a beneficial act for me by facilitating his transition to a new relationship, suggesting I should eventually be capable of expressing happiness for their union. I emitted a sound of incredulous laughter. I then notified her that she was suffering from a severe case of delusional thinking if she genuinely believed I would ever find joy in this outcome, and I terminated the communication. My subsequent call was directed to Brian. He answered on this attempt, immediately launching into a comprehensive justification regarding how he never intended to cause me pain, how feelings simply evolve, and how he and Emily simply meshed together in a manner that we never could. I inquired whether he had been utilizing my closest friend as an instrument to gather private data about me, and he insisted the dynamic was not precisely like that. Emily, he argued, simply discussed me naturally because she genuinely cared. But yes, he reluctantly conceded that she had shared personal matters I had confided in her, my deeply held anxieties, my relationship insecurities, all of it. He maintained that this intelligence merely aided him in achieving a deeper understanding of my perspective. He had effectively helped himself to my private deliberations, leveraging them to devise an appropriate method of managing my reactions while he meticulously engineered his exit strategy with my alleged best friend. I asked if the requested space was merely a pretense designed to conduct a trial run of a relationship with Emily, and he became momentarily silent, then replied that the situation was highly intricate. He required time to comprehensively assess his feelings, and during that period he had ultimately determined that Emily was the individual he desired. I emphatically stated that our relationship was irrevocably concluded, and that he could autonomously ascertain the logistics of retrieving his possessions from my apartment, as he would never be allowed to set foot inside it again. He requested the possibility of an in-person discussion upon his return to offer a proper explanation, and I responded with, "Absolutely not." I disconnected the call. And here is the element that might cause astonishment. I did not shed a tear. I did not suffer a complete emotional collapse. I became strategic. I systematically moved through my apartment and placed every single item Brian had abandoned into cardboard containers. I telephoned his brother, Stephen, and issued an ultimatum: retrieve the belongings by Friday, or they would be unceremoniously discarded into the refuse receptacle. Stephen, surprisingly, was genuinely remorseful. He claimed he possessed no prior knowledge that Brian was vacationing in the southern state with Emily. He had been under the sincere impression that his brother was actually residing with him and grappling with personal relationship issues. Even his own sibling had been the recipient of deceitful manipulation. I disposed of all photographic evidence of our shared time. I permanently erased our joint pictures from my mobile device and all social media profiles. I systematically eradicated every trace of his presence from my existence in the span of one highly efficient evening. Thursday, I attended my professional duties as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Friday, I completed my shift and proceeded directly to the fitness center. Saturday, I undertook an exhaustive deep cleaning of my apartment and rearranged the internal furniture configuration so that it no longer resembled the dwelling Brian and I had previously shared. Sunday, they returned from their excursion. I am aware of this because Emily posted an image of them at the luggage retrieval area, looking bronzed and content. They instantaneously commenced posting shared life content, documenting dinner engagements, cinematic nights, behaving as if they had been a committed couple for an indefinite duration. Our shared circle of acquaintances was sharply divided. Some individuals reached out to me confidentially, expressing their disbelief regarding Emily's actions. Others merely accepted the situation and left affirmative comments on their posts, as if all was entirely conventional. I severed all digital connection with anyone who appeared to endorse this development, as I had no requirement for such individuals in my life. My mother learned of the situation from Josie and initiated a worried phone call. I assured her of my genuine well-being, and I truly was. I was incensed but fundamentally stable. Over the course of the next 7 days, I observed their curated depiction of a blissful existence on social media, patronizing the very establishments we frequented, socializing with friends, impersonating the quintessential happy couple who had assuredly not constructed their relationship upon a foundation of fabrications and treachery. And throughout my observation period I was deeply contemplating, because here is the crucial point Brian and all individuals who engage in infidelity fail to grasp. When one perpetrates an act of betrayal against another, they do not merely forfeit that individual. They relinquish the intellectual advantage of everything that person was aware of concerning them, everything they previously safeguarded them from, everything they potentially could have cautioned the next partner about. And I possessed intimate knowledge regarding both of them, facts they had likely not yet disclosed to one another because they were too preoccupied in the thrall of their exciting, new, prohibited passion. Emily possessed a history, a verifiable pattern of behavior. She had systematically engaged in infidelity with every single romantic partner she had ever maintained. She had confessed this to me years prior during a period of intoxication and candid discussion regarding our respective character flaws. She confessed to easily succumbing to boredom, reveling in the sensation of novelty, and being unable to restrain herself when she felt attraction to someone new. She had literally been unfaithful to her ex-boyfriend Jason on 3 distinct occasions before he finally initiated the termination of their relationship. I had provided emotional support to her throughout that particular breakup, listened to her express sorrow about her inability to maintain faithfulness, how she was aware her actions were morally reprehensible but seemed powerless to cease. Brian was completely ignorant that he was commencing a relationship with a recurrent betrayer. He likely harbored the belief that he was exceptional, that their connection was inherently distinct. And Brian possessed his own established deficiencies that Emily was yet to discover. His innate tendency toward excessive jealousy, his compulsion to exercise control over all situations, his predilection for becoming paranoid regarding his girlfriend's male acquaintances. Issues I had addressed and skillfully navigated because I held affection for him. Issues that would unequivocally surface once the initial idealized phase with Emily invariably waned. They were convinced they had emerged victorious, believing they had executed their escape cleanly and could simply ride off into a shared, joyous future. But my observational period was not complete, and my methodical planning was certainly ongoing. Friday evening, precisely a fortnight after I had first encountered their image in that aquatic setting, I was reclining in my bed when Emily published an ephemeral story showcasing them at a social gathering with mutual friends. Everyone was smiling, engaged in merriment, presenting the facade of the quintessential blissful couple. I captured a digital copy, adding it to a dedicated folder on my laptop where I had been systematically accumulating evidence. Their recent social media posts, the precise timestamps indicating when they had initiated commenting on one another's photographs, screen captures of historical text exchanges where Emily had confided in me about her history of infidelity. I was not formulating anything illegal or overtly reckless, but I was developing a course of action, because they had subjected me to profound humiliation. And worse, they genuinely believed I would simply vanish without a protest, permitting them to achieve their fairy tale conclusion. I accessed my digital note-taking application and commenced documenting every piece of information I possessed concerning Emily's behavioral patterns, concerning Brian's susceptibility to jealousy, concerning their individual vulnerabilities and areas of insecurity, and the factors that would inevitably precipitate difficulties between them. Then my mind turned to Jason, Emily's former partner whom she had repeatedly betrayed, the one who had finally reached his limit and terminated their engagement. I had been introduced to him on a few occasions at social events back when they were together. A pleasant individual. And if my memory served me accurately, Emily had mentioned he had relocated back to the area a few months prior. I permitted myself a slight smile. If Emily harbored the notion that she could simply proceed to her next victim without facing consequences, she was about to be educated otherwise. I closed my computer and settled in for the night. For the first time in 2 weeks, I experienced an excellent night's rest, because the following day I was prepared to commence the execution of my plan. Update. Okay, so do you recall my statement regarding the existence of a strategic maneuver? Well, it materialized rapidly. And frankly, it's quite an ingenious scheme if I may offer my own assessment. Monday morning, I was at a general merchandise retail outlet procuring laundry detergent and several other miscellaneous necessities before commencing my workday when I literally collided with Brian. I nearly drove my shopping carriage into him within the aisle dedicated to cleaning products. He was in the company of Emily. The expressions of astonishment on all 3 of our faces were utterly priceless. Emily immediately seized Brian's arm as though I was poised to initiate a physical assault against them or something similar. I simply remained stationary with my cart, staring intently at them. Brian actually possessed the unmitigated audacity to offer a self-satisfied small smile. A smirk. He then encircled Emily's waist with his arm and deliberately drew her closer. He performed an entire theatrical display of kissing her cheek while maintaining direct visual contact with me. Emily emitted a high-pitched, affected laugh, as if this entire scenario was terribly amusing. He uttered, "Hello there, I didn't anticipate encountering you here. Are you managing all right?" in a feigned voice of concern that instilled in me the desire to hurl my laundry detergent at his head. I responded that I was doing spectacularly well. I thanked him for the inquiry. Emily interjected, utilizing a saccharine tone, stating that she hoped there were no lingering animosities, that they were simply obeying the dictates of their hearts, and that she hoped I could exhibit a level of maturity regarding the circumstance. Maturity. She expected me to demonstrate emotional maturity after the magnitude of their actions. Brian chimed in, saying, "Indeed, it would be quite unfortunate if you were unable to progress and persisted in dwelling on the past. You really ought to concentrate on finding your own happiness instead of nurturing resentment." Emily nodded in agreement, as if they had diligently rehearsed this entire statement. I offered them a pleasant smile and expressed my sincere hope that they would find enduring happiness together. Emily appeared surprised, as if she had been anticipating a dramatic scene from me. Brian seemed almost disappointed that I was not providing him with the conflict he clearly desired. I walked away seething with quiet fury, but I maintained my composure. I was not going to grant them the gratification of witnessing my distress. Wednesday, I was at the pharmaceutical establishment, operating the cash register, when Emily inevitably walked in. Of course. She walked directly to my designated register with her medical prescription, despite the fact that 2 other registers were currently open for service. She was explicitly seeking to rub her treachery directly in my face. She stood there while I processed her medication, acting excessively friendly, inquiring about my recent well-being, suggesting that we should arrange to meet for coffee sometime to discuss matters like sensible adults. I informed her that my schedule was particularly demanding these days, and she responded with, "Oh, I'm certain it is. It must be challenging to readapt to single life." Then she leaned forward and whispered that Brian was extraordinary, surpassing her wildest expectations, and she felt immense gratitude that things had transpired the way they did. She suggested that perhaps if I had been more proficient at sustaining his interest, he would not have been compelled to seek fulfillment elsewhere. I presented her with the prescription bag without uttering a solitary word. She departed, seemingly quite pleased with herself. That night, I took the time to seriously contemplate my desired outcome. I no longer harbored any desire for Brian's return. The sight of him at the retail store had made that absolutely evident. He was an arrogant, self-satisfied individual who believed he had successfully prevailed. Emily was a devious manipulator who clearly derived pleasure from highlighting her betrayal to me. I wanted them to experience a measure of the profound emotional pain they had inflicted upon me. And simply getting back together with Brian wasn't a sufficient recompense. They needed to endure authentic treachery, genuine humiliation. That is when the memory of Jason, Emily's former partner whom she had cheated on, repeatedly resurfaced. The one she had confessed details about during one of our drunken, intimate conversations years ago. She had characterized him as uninspiring, claiming she was incapable of resisting infidelity because she required exhilaration, that she wished she could be monogamous, but she simply grew bored with ease. I located his profile on Instagram by reviewing Emily's historical photographs from 2 years prior. He was identified in numerous images from the period of their relationship. He appeared to be a respectable man, interested in outdoor exploration and specialized beers. He seemed perfectly ordinary. I transmitted a direct message to him on Friday evening, introducing myself as an acquaintance of Emily's, stating I had some queries regarding their association if he was available for communication. He responded on Saturday morning agreeing. He stated he would be pleased to discuss Emily, given that she had apparently transitioned to systematically dismantling the amicable relations of others now, and he had been privy to the social media spectacle. We arranged to convene on Sunday afternoon. Jason arrived wearing a hooded garment and denim trousers, looking exactly as depicted in his images. We secured a table toward the rear of the establishment, and I simply disclosed the entire narrative to him. How Emily had been my most trusted confidant, how she had engaged in intimacy with Brian while feigning moral support for me, the complete situation. He did not express an ounce of surprise. He remarked that this was classic Emily conduct. He recounted her infidelity with his colleague, then with a man from her health club, then with an entirely random individual she had encountered at a public house. Each instance was followed by her tears and profuse apologies, and a solemn promise that such an event would never recur. Each time he had extended his belief in her because he was devoted to her and held on to the hope of her potential for change. I inquired when their definitive separation had occurred, and he stated approximately 9 months ago. The definitive breaking point was his discovery of text messages on her phone, directed to 3 separate men, all characterized by flirtation and inappropriate content. He had confronted her directly, and she had attempted to reverse the blame onto him, asserting that he was too monotonous and failed to provide her with adequate focus. Then I posed the essential query. Had Emily attempted to contact him recently? He retrieved his phone and displayed a series of messages from the preceding week. Emily had texted him on Tuesday, expressing that she missed his presence and wished to catch up. Thursday, she had sent him a photograph of a restaurant they once patronized, claiming it had evoked memories of him. Friday, she had inquired if he would be interested in getting alcoholic beverages sometime. He had been intentionally ignoring her communications because he was absolutely unwilling to succumb to her manipulative attempts again. But upon reviewing the dates, I realized she had initiated contact with Jason almost immediately upon her return from the southern coastal state with Brian. While she was actively posting photographs of herself as Brian's partner, she was already securing her next romantic contingency. I reclined in my chair and presented Jason with a proposition. He arched his eyebrows and asked the nature of the proposal. I explained that my objective was to comprehensively unmask Emily for the person she truly was. To reveal to Brian and everyone else that she was a chronic transgressor who would never fundamentally alter her ways. But I required his cooperation to achieve this outcome. He inquired about my precise intentions and I laid out the specifics. I wished for him to respond to Emily's messages, consent to meet with her, allow her to engage in flirtation and escalate the situation in her customary fashion. And when she inevitably attempted to engage in intimacy with him, because based on her behavioral pattern, that was the precise trajectory the situation would take, I wanted him to secure a video recording of the encounter. Jason stared at me for a prolonged moment. He then asked if I was expressing genuine seriousness, and I affirmed my absolute commitment. Emily had consciously made her decisions. She had betrayed my trust, subjected me to humiliation, and was now actively taunting me at every viable opportunity. She was deserving of whatever repercussions were imminent. He stated he would carefully consider the request, asking for a full day to decide if he wished to participate in such an extensive level of relational drama. Monday evening, he sent me a text message. He was in. We convened again on Tuesday at a casual dining establishment to meticulously plan every detail. Jason revealed that Emily had texted him again on Monday night, inquiring if he had received her communications. He had replied that morning, confirming receipt, apologizing for his delay due to professional obligations, but expressing his strong desire to reconnect. She had responded within minutes, expressing her immense pleasure. They should absolutely get together imminently. She had a multitude of matters to share with him. Jason displayed the messages to me, and I could literally discern her methodical groundwork. The flirtatious undertones, the suggestive comments regarding thinking of him, all of it. I instructed Jason to propose a meeting on Thursday for alcoholic beverages somewhere public but featuring semi-private seating where they could converse confidentially. He transmitted the message while we were seated there, and Emily agreed without hesitation. We dedicated the following hour to reviewing the detailed plan. Jason would meet her for drinks, allow her to converse, flirt, and naturally progress toward suggesting they relocate to a more private setting. If she initiated a physical advance, he would reciprocate, but ensure his mobile phone was actively recording. I provided him with explicit instructions on the optimal way to position the device to clearly capture the entire event. He asked if I was absolutely certain about this course of action, and I confirmed that I was. Emily had made her choices. She had betrayed me, humiliated me, and was now proactively securing her next romantic conquest while taunting me. She deserved the entirety of the consequences that would ensue. Wednesday, I observed Brian and Emily together at the food market. They were in the section dedicated to produce, and I overheard Brian's voice before I saw him. He was commenting loudly to Emily that his former partner, myself, had appeared remarkably pathetic when he had unexpectedly encountered me at the retail outlet, suggesting I was barely holding myself together. Emily laughed and said something to the effect of my having always been inherently weak and overly emotional. I quickly concealed myself behind the bread display before they could spot me, listening to them engage in denigrating commentary about me for another 5 minutes. Brian remarked that he felt a measure of pity for me because I had clearly been completely unaware of his unhappiness. And that must constitute a significant blow to my ego. Emily added that I would likely never find someone as commendable as him and would ultimately regret his loss. The sheer brazenness. He abandoned me. Do you recall? After requesting solitude to pursue intimacy with my closest friend. But I did not confront them. I simply abandoned my shopping cart and exited the store, because I knew that if I remained, I would utter something I could never retract. And I required them to believe I was emotionally broken. I needed them to feel self-satisfied and secure while my retaliatory plan successfully coalesced. Thursday, I messaged Jason, "Best of luck." He returned an affirmative digital symbol and stated he would communicate with me upon completion. I spent that entire evening restlessly pacing within my apartment, incessantly checking my mobile phone every 5 minutes. Josie telephoned me around 8 p.m., utterly frantic, inquiring if I had completely lost my mind and what exactly I thought I was doing. I asserted that this outcome was precisely what Emily deserved. And Josie sighed and conceded, "Fine, but if this scheme backfires catastrophically, I am absolutely not going to say, 'I warned you.'" Around 11 p.m., Jason transmitted a text message to me. It had been successful. He had captured everything. "You were entirely correct about her." I immediately initiated a phone call to him. He answered, and I could hear the background noise indicating he was in his vehicle. He reported that Emily had been overtly affectionate toward him from the moment they were seated at the bar, touching his arm, moving into close proximity, discussing how much she had missed him. Following 2 alcoholic beverages, she had proposed relocating to his dwelling. He had consented. Upon arrival at his apartment, he had strategically positioned his phone on his dresser, actively recording, before their physical interaction proceeded further. And Emily had unequivocally initiated the sexual encounter. Kissing him, commencing the removal of clothing, the entire sequence of events, all captured on video evidence. He commented that reviewing the footage was a surreal experience because this was the precise, recognizable Emily he recalled. Impulsive, entirely self-centered, incapable of self-control when pursuing a desire. He asked if I wished for him to transmit the video file to me, and I replied affirmatively, but not immediately. I asked what Emily had said in the aftermath. He laughed bitterly and recounted her laying there, discussing how she had made a mistake returning to Brian, how she had never truly recovered from Jason, how perhaps they should attempt to rekindle their relationship. He had played along, suggesting he would consider the idea. She had then redressed and departed, kissing him goodbye at the entrance, and promising to text him the following day. I requested that he retain the video file for the time being. I was still determining the exact methodology and timing for the release of this explosive information. I required the maximum possible impact. Friday morning, Emily once again arrived at the pharmacy. On this occasion, she appeared exceptionally joyful, practically radiant. She came directly to my register and commenced talking about how magnificent her life was, how deeply in love she and Brian were, how she had never experienced such profound happiness. I simply processed her prescription in silence while she spoke. Then she made a statement that caused my blood pressure to spike. She mentioned that Brian had informed her I had appeared genuinely distressed when he had seen me at the retail outlet, and it had caused her a minor feeling of guilt. So she wished to reach out and let me know she hoped I would eventually find a suitable partner. That perhaps if I engaged in personal refinement and ascertained the reasons why I was incapable of maintaining a man's interest, I would experience better fortune in the future. I handed her the bag and offered a composed smile. I told her I had, in fact, been dedicating significant effort to personal development recently, and I was feeling exceptionally positive about the trajectory of my life. She looked perplexed, as if that was not the reaction she had anticipated. Saturday, Brian transmitted a text message to me entirely unsolicited. He stated he had heard through mutual acquaintances that I had been experiencing a difficult period, and he wished to ascertain my well-being. That despite all that had transpired, he still maintained concern for me as a human being. I offered no reply. Sunday, he texted again, asserting that Emily felt remorseful about the entire situation and wished to ensure I knew they had not intended to inflict pain upon me. That they hoped eventually we could all exhibit sufficient maturity to remain within the same social network as friends. I responded with a single communication: advise Emily that she ought to concentrate intensely on her current relationship with you. It appears to require her undivided attention. He sent a confused emoticon in response and inquired about the meaning of my statement. I deliberately left his message unanswered. Monday, Jason texted, inquiring if I had reached a decision regarding the intended use of the video. He reported that Emily had been texting him continuously since Thursday night, expressing a desire to see him again, asking when they could meet. She was already fully disengaged from her relationship with Brian, while simultaneously posting coupled images with him on the social media platform. I instructed Jason to remain patient, that I was awaiting the optimal moment. And then, Tuesday morning, that perfect opportunity presented itself. Emily published a post on Instagram featuring an extensive caption discussing the discovery of one's fated companion and the certainty of knowing when one has found the one, accompanied by a photograph of her and Brian at a dining establishment. The comments section was filled with individuals offering congratulations and expressing that they were such an endearing couple. I captured a screenshot and transmitted it to Jason, informing him that the time was now. He called me and we finalized the precise plan for how this scenario was going to unfold. Wednesday evening, I was going to ensure Brian and Emily both received precisely what they unequivocally deserved, and I was going to relish every solitary moment of the experience. Final update. Okay, so all of you are likely desperate to know the ultimate outcome of this situation. And truthfully, it was even more spectacular than I had initially envisioned. Wednesday evening, Jason texted me, reporting that Emily had just messaged him, inquiring if he wanted to come over to her place. Brian was apparently engaged in professional duties late into the night, and she was experiencing boredom and desired company. Jason captured a digital screenshot of the message and sent it to me. She literally included a winky face emoticon. I instructed Jason to agree, but to propose they meet at the bar where they had previously gone on Thursday, and then proceed to his residence afterward. I needed the video evidence to clearly substantiate that Emily had instigated the entire episode, that she had deliberately gone to meet her former partner while actively committed to a relationship with Brian. Jason consented to meet her at 8 p.m. I remained in my apartment, meticulously observing the clock, continuously checking my phone. Around 9 p.m., Jason texted, "She has arrived. The operation is in progress." I restlessly traversed my living room for the next 2 hours. Josie telephoned me, completely distraught, asking if I was truly following through with this plan, and I unequivocally affirmed my intent. Emily was deserving of all imminent consequences. Josie stated she supported my actions, but also confessed she found me somewhat terrifying at that moment and was grateful we were sisters and not adversaries. Around 11:30 p.m., Jason texted, "Mission accomplished." She just departed. Transmitting all files to you immediately. My phone buzzed with the incoming video file. Jason had positioned his phone flawlessly on the dresser, and the video quality was sharp. One could clearly discern Emily's face and audibly hear her voice. I saved the video file in 3 distinct locations. I then sat there, meticulously attempting to determine the most effective way to ensure Brian viewed the evidence. Thursday morning, I was preparing for my workday when a sudden inspiration struck me. I created an anonymous social media profile. No identifying picture, a random, obscure username. I transmitted the video to Brian via a direct message with only a singular accompanying text. I thought you should be aware of the true nature of the person you are currently dating. This occurred last night while you were occupied at your work. I then transmitted the identical video to Emily from the same anonymous account with the message. Brian is going to view this footage. You might want to meticulously prepare your explanation. I proceeded to my workplace, experiencing a profound sense of power for the first time in several weeks. Maggie inquired why I appeared so cheerful, and I informed her she would soon ascertain the reason. Around the noon hour, my mobile phone commenced an intense flurry of activity. Brian was calling me. Emily was calling me. Text messages were arriving from both of them. I deliberately ignored every incoming communication and persisted with my work duties. The text messages emanating from Brian transitioned from perplexed to furious to utterly desperate over the course of 3 hours. He telephoned me 11 times, leaving audio messages that ranged from asking what was happening to demanding I return his call to literally pleading for me to answer. Emily's messages exhibited a different trajectory. She commenced by inquiring about my actions, then escalated to issuing threats against me, then attempted to adopt the role of the victim, claiming I was systematically destroying her life and that I was a terrible person for recording her without her knowledge. I offered no reply to any of her correspondence. Around 4 p.m., my supervisor, Blake, discreetly requested a private conversation and mentioned I was receiving an excessive volume of personal calls and texts, inquiring if everything was acceptable. I assured him everything was fine, merely some temporary relational conflict with my former partner that would dissipate quickly. He conceded, but suggested I perhaps activate the silent mode on my phone for the remaining duration of my shift. When I concluded my work at 6 p.m., I possessed 43 unanswered calls and over 100 text messages, the majority originating from Brian, with a minority from Emily. I entered my vehicle and finally listened to Brian's recorded messages. The initial few were him requesting me to call him, stating he was in urgent need of conversation. Then they became progressively angrier. Him asserting I was a deranged individual for transmitting that video, demanding to know its source, requiring clarification on whether I had employed someone to surveil Emily. Then the overall emotional tone shifted dramatically. Voicemail number 8 contained him audibly sobbing. Genuine crying, his voice cracking, barely forming coherent sentences. He stated he had confronted Emily about the video, and she had admitted its veracity, confessing that she had engaged in intimacy with Jason on Wednesday night, that she had been continuously texting him for weeks, that everything he had abandoned me for was a complete and utter deception. He begged me to return his calls. He claimed he required communication with someone who genuinely comprehended him, that I was the only person who truly knew him, and that he had made the most profound error of his life. Voicemail 9 contained him stating that Emily had attempted to assign the blame to me, claiming I had somehow orchestrated the entire situation and manipulated Jason into sleeping with her, that I was obsessively committed to the destruction of their relationship because I could not cope with being alone. Brian mentioned he had told her that theory was absurd, but then he began to ponder if perhaps I had been involved, and could I please just call him and explain the sequence of events. Voicemail 10 reverted to uncontrollable weeping. He stated Emily had finally confessed she had been unfaithful to all her previous boyfriends, that she had informed him she was incapable of restraining herself, that she became bored easily, and that she would likely never be monogamous with anyone. He confessed he felt like a complete fool for believing she would act differently with him. I sat in my vehicle in the pharmacy parking area, listening to his emotional collapse, and I registered no discernible feeling. No empathy, no sense of gratification, just a profound, cold certainty that he was entirely deserving of every fraction of this pain. I permanently deleted all the audio messages without responding. Emily's text messages presented a different narrative. She initiated the communication by calling me every conceivable derogatory term, asserting I was psychotic, that I had completely orchestrated the entire scenario, that I had somehow persuaded Jason to sleep with her and record it solely to cause the breakdown of her and Brian's relationship, that I was obsessed with Brian and unable to accept his moving on. Then she employed a change in tactic and attempted to adopt the victim role, stating she had made an error, but that everyone makes errors and I was being vindictive and malicious. That genuine friends extend forgiveness to one another and we could collectively resolve this if I would only exhibit reason. That Brian had initially believed her assertion that this was entirely my fault, and we could both move beyond this if I would simply admit my actions. Except apparently Brian no longer believed her, because his messages communicated a completely opposing narrative. Then Emily became desperate. She expressed her profound apology for everything, admitting she knew she had caused me pain, but that this action was going too far. That causing the dissolution of her relationship was a display of petty immaturity, and that I should feel a sense of profound shame for sinking to this level of conduct. I finally replied to her with a solitary text message. You caused the destruction of your own relationship the exact moment you made the decision to be unfaithful, precisely as you have systematically destroyed every relationship you have ever pursued. I did not compel you to engage in intimacy with Jason. You accomplished that entirely on your own volition. She attempted to call me instantaneously. I declined the incoming communication and permanently blocked her number. Friday morning, Brian appeared at the entrance to my apartment. I had just finished bathing and was preparing for work when I heard vigorous pounding on my entrance door. I looked through the small viewing hole and there he stood. I opened the door slightly but prevented his entry. He immediately commenced speaking, his words cascading forth so rapidly I could barely comprehend them. He stated he had terminated his relationship with Emily, that she was a chronic liar and a betrayer, that he should never have believed anything she had stated, that she had manipulated both of us and played us against each other. I folded my arms and calmly inquired about the reason for his presence at my dwelling. He claimed he was in need of my presence, that I was the only positive factor he had ever possessed, and he had carelessly discarded it for someone who never cared for him whatsoever. That Emily had utilized him as a tool for revenge against me, and he had been too naive to recognize it. That every assertion she had made regarding our relationship being fundamentally broken was a deception, because she desired to justify her own actions. I asked him if he genuinely believed Emily had manipulated him, or if perhaps he simply desired to believe that narrative, because it was more convenient than admitting he was an unfaithful individual who had systematically destroyed his own relationship for someone who appeared momentarily exciting and novel. He began to insist that the situation was not as I described. Emily had actively pursued him.